The rain fell like shattered glass across the Seattle streets. Claire Bennett pressed her daughter closer to her chest, the thin blanket barely protecting 3-month-old Lily from the downpour. Her feet ached, her lungs burned, and behind her, she could hear Derek's voice cutting through the storm like a blade. She ran without thinking, without planning. The alley opened onto a main street where cars hissed past, their headlights creating rivers of gold on the wet pavement. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she spotted a black SUV idling at the corner, its engine purring softly in the rain. Without hesitation, Claire yanked open the passenger door and tumbled inside, water streaming from her hair and clothes. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. A man sat behind the wheel, his hands freezing on the steering wheel as he turned to face her. The stranger in the storm, Vincent Romano, had been waiting for a business associate when the drenched woman collapsed into his vehicle. His first instinct was anger. Nobody touched his car without permission. But then he saw the bundle in her arms, heard the thin cry of an infant, and something ancient stirred in his chest. The woman's eyes were wild with terror, her lips trembling as she gasped out words between sobs. "Please, I need to hide. Just for a minute. He's coming. Don't let him find me." Vincent's jaw tightened. He'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when someone was lying and when they were genuinely desperate. This woman wasn't acting. The fear rolling off her was real, tangible, thick enough to choke on. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he saw a figure emerge from the alley. Tall, aggressive, scanning the street with predatory focus. The man's face was twisted with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. Vincent made a decision that would alter the course of his carefully controlled life. He reached over and locked all the doors, then tinted the windows with a press of a button. The world outside became a blur of shadows and rain. The hunter and the hunted Derek spotted the SUV and approached, his face pressed against the glass, trying to see inside. Claire held her breath, pressing herself against the seat, covering Lily's mouth gently to muffle any sound. The baby's warmth was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. Vincent sat perfectly still, his expression neutral, his body language revealing nothing. Years of navigating dangerous situations had taught him the power of stillness. Derek pounded once on the window, shouted something lost to the rain, then finally moved on, his figure dissolving into the storm. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. Claire's breathing gradually slowed, though her hands still shook. Lily had fallen asleep, her tiny face peaceful against her mother's shoulder, completely unaware of the danger they'd just escaped. "Thank you," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't run anymore." Vincent studied her carefully. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair plastered to her face and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. The baby couldn't be more than a few months old. Questions. Without answers, "Who was that man?" Vincent asked, his voice low and measured. "My ex-boyfriend." "Lily's father." Claire's grip on her daughter tightened. "He found us tonight. I've been hiding for 3 months, moving from shelter to shelter. Tonight he tracked me down." Vincent's hands flexed on the steering wheel. He recognized the signs. This wasn't just about a bad breakup. This was about control, about violence, about a woman running for her life. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Claire shook her head, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "No family. No friends I can trust anymore." Derek made sure of that. "He isolated me from everyone before I finally got away." Vincent reached into the back seat and pulled out a jacket, draping it over her shoulders. The gesture was automatic, surprising even himself. He'd spent years building walls around his emotions, becoming the kind of man who solved problems with money and influence rather than compassion. But something about this woman and her child cracked those walls. "A dangerous offer. My name is Vincent Romano," he said finally. "I have a place where you can stay tonight. It's secure. He won't find you there. Claire looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Why would you help a complete stranger? Vincent started the engine, the SUV's powerful motor rumbling to life. Because I know what it's like to feel hunted. And because that baby deserves better than spending the night in the rain. He didn't tell her about his past, about the childhood spent watching his mother suffer at his father's hands, about the vow he'd made to never let anyone experience that kind of helplessness if he could prevent it. Those were stories for another time, if there ever was another time. Claire nodded slowly, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Where are we going? Somewhere Derek will never think to look. Into the unknown. The SUV pulled away from the curb, its tires spraying water as it merged into traffic. Seattle's downtown lights reflected off the wet streets, creating a dreamlike landscape of color and shadow. Claire watched the city pass by through the tinted windows, feeling as though she'd stepped through a doorway into another world. Vincent drove with quiet confidence, taking turns that led them away from the busy streets into quieter neighborhoods. The rain continued its relentless assault on the city, but inside the SUV, Claire felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Not quite safety, not yet, but the possibility of it. Lily stirred in her arms, making small sounds of contentment. Claire looked down at her daughter's face, so innocent and trusting, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. Whatever happened next, whatever this stranger's true intentions were, at least for this moment they were out of the storm. Vincent glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable in the dashboard's soft glow. Something had shifted in him the moment she'd tumbled into his car. He'd spent years avoiding emotional entanglements, focusing solely on building his business empire and maintaining his reputation as someone not to be crossed. Now, driving through the rain-soaked streets with a terrified mother and her infant daughter, Vincent Romano felt the first crack in the armor he'd so carefully constructed. He didn't know if he was making the biggest mistake of his life or finally doing something that mattered. The city lights faded behind them as they headed toward the hills, where Vincent's penthouse overlooked the sound. Behind them, Derek continued his search, unaware that his prey had just found the most dangerous protector in Seattle. The elevator climbed silently through the building, its mirrored walls reflecting Claire's exhausted face back at her from every angle. She looked like a ghost, pale and trembling, clutching Lily as though the baby might vanish if she loosened her grip even slightly. Vincent stood beside her, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling. When the doors opened, Claire stepped into a space that took her breath away. The penthouse stretched before her like something from a magazine, all clean lines and expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Seattle's glittering skyline. The rain streaked down the glass like tears, but inside, everything was warm and impossibly perfect. "This is where you live?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent removed his wet jacket, hanging it carefully on a hook by the door. "Sometimes. I have other properties. This one is the most secure." He disappeared down a hallway and returned moments later with towels, dry clothes, and a thick blanket. "The guest room is through there. There's a crib that was left by the previous owner. I never got around to removing it." Claire took the items, her fingers brushing against his. The contact was brief but electric, sending a jolt of awareness through her exhausted body. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for this." Vincent's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "You don't need to repay me. Just rest. You're safe here." Midnight confessions. Hours later, after Claire had bathed and fed Lily, after she'd tucked her daughter into the surprisingly well-equipped nursery, she found herself unable to sleep. The apartment was too quiet, too perfect. After months of shelters and cheap motels, the silence felt unnatural. She wandered into the living room and found Vincent standing by the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city below. He'd changed into black pants and a dark shirt, his hair still slightly damp from his own shower. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without turning around. Claire moved to stand beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "I keep thinking he'll burst through the door any second. I know it's irrational. This building has security, cameras, everything. But fear doesn't listen to logic." Vincent took a slow sip of his drink. "No, it doesn't. Fear is its own kind of prison. Something." In his tone made Claire look at him more closely. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." He was quiet for a long moment, the city lights casting shadows across his angular features. "When I was 8 years old, I watched my father beat my mother unconscious. I hid in a closet and listened to her scream. By the time I was brave enough to come out, she wasn't moving." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "Vincent, I'm so sorry." He continued as though she hadn't spoken, his voice flat and distant. She survived, but she was never the same. Something broke inside her that night. My father went to prison for 3 years. 3 years for nearly killing someone. When he got out, she took him back. "Why would she do that?" Claire whispered. Vincent turned to face her, and in his eyes Claire saw an ocean of old pain, because she believed she had no other choice, because he'd convinced her that she was worthless without him. Because trauma does strange things to people, makes them believe they deserve the violence. Claire felt tears sliding down her cheeks. That's how Derek made me feel. Like I was nothing. Like I'd be lost without him. Even when he was hurting me, part of me believed I deserved it. Vincent set down his glass and moved closer, his presence solid and grounding. "You didn't deserve it. Nobody deserves that." "How did you get away from your father?" Claire asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. "I didn't. He died in a car accident when I was 15. I stood at his funeral and felt nothing but relief. Then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. It took me years to understand that you can't mourn someone who only brought you pain." Building, walls and breaking. Then Claire studied Vincent's face, seeing past the expensive clothes and commanding presence to the scared child still hiding underneath. "We're more alike than I thought." Vincent's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's why I stopped. When you jumped into my car tonight, holding your daughter, running from someone who was supposed to protect you, I saw my mother. I saw myself. I couldn't drive away." "What happened to your mother?" Claire asked gently. "She died 5 years ago." "Cancer." Vincent's voice grew rough. "Before she passed, she told me she was proud of who I'd become. She said I'd taken all the darkness from my childhood and turned it into strength. I'm not sure she was right." Claire reached out tentatively and touched his arm. "You saved us tonight. That takes strength. That takes humanity." Vincent looked down at her hand on his arm, and something shifted in his expression. "For years, I've built walls around myself. I've made sure nobody gets close enough to hurt me. I've turned myself into someone people fear rather than love. It seemed safer that way. And now," Claire prompted, "now I'm standing in my living room at 2 in the morning, talking to a woman I met 3 hours ago, and those walls feel like they're crumbling. The weight of trust." They stood in silence, the rain continuing its endless percussion against the windows. Outside, the city never slept, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Inside, 2 damaged souls found themselves connected by invisible threads of shared trauma and fragile hope. "Tell me about Derek," Vincent said finally. "How did it start?" Claire moved to the couch and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. "He was charming at first. Attentive. He made me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Then slowly, so slowly I didn't notice, until it was too late. He started cutting me off from my friends, my family. He'd get jealous if I talked to anyone else. He'd check my phone, my emails, everything. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression dark. The first time he hit me, I was 6 months pregnant. Claire's voice cracked. I'd talked to a male cashier at the grocery store. Derek said I was flirting. He punched me in the stomach. I thought I was going to lose Lily that night. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Did you call the police? Claire shook her head. He told me if I did, he'd make sure I never saw my baby. He had connections, he said. Friends who could make things disappear. I was terrified. So I stayed. I endured. Until the night he tried to hurt Lily, the breaking point. What happened? Vincent asked, his voice dangerously soft. Claire's tears flowed freely now. She was crying. Just normal baby crying. Derek was drunk. He picked her up and shook her, told her to shut up. I saw something in his eyes, Vincent, the same look he got before he hurt me. In that moment, I knew if I didn't leave, he would kill one of us eventually. So you ran. I grabbed Lily and the diaper bag and walked out the door while he was passed out on the couch. I had $47 and a bus pass. That was 3 months ago. I've been moving ever since, staying one step ahead of him. Until tonight. Vincent crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers. Listen to me carefully. Claire, Derek will not find you here. I have resources, connections that go far beyond anything he can imagine. You and Lily are under my protection now. Why would you do this for us? Claire asked, searching his face. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. An unspoken promise. Vincent reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek, his touch surprisingly tender. Maybe I'm doing it for that 8-year-old boy who couldn't protect his mother. Maybe I'm doing it because, for the first time in years, helping you makes me feel human again. Or maybe I'm doing it because when you look at me, you don't see a monster. I don't see a monster, Claire whispered. I see someone who's been hurt and chose to become strong instead of cruel. Vincent stood, extending his hand to her. It's late. You need rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out a long-term plan. Claire took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Thank you, Vincent. For everything. As she turned to leave, Vincent called after her. Claire. She looked back. You're not alone anymore. Remember that. New dangers. Stirring, what neither of them knew was that across the city, Derek had called in favors with men who operated in Seattle's criminal underworld. He'd shown them photos of Claire and Lily, offered money for any information about their whereabouts. Men who knew men who might have seen something, and one of those men had noticed a black SUV with distinctive custom rims picking up a woman and baby in the rain earlier that evening. He'd gotten a partial license plate. It wouldn't take long to trace. Derek sat in his dingy apartment, drinking straight from a bottle, his phone in his hand. He'd already sent out Claire's photo to a dozen contacts. Someone would find her. Someone always did. Nobody left Derek Patterson. Nobody took his child and disappeared. He'd make sure Claire understood that lesson permanently. In the penthouse high above the city, Claire finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the danger she'd fled was already closing in. Vincent stood watch by the windows, his mind racing through contingencies and plans, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd meant what he said. Claire and Lily were under his protection now, and Vincent Romano always kept his promises, no matter what they cost. Him. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean while darkness gathered in its shadows, preparing for the storm that was coming. Morning arrived with pale sunlight breaking through the clouds, painting Seattle in shades of silver and gold. Claire woke to the sound of Lily cooing softly in her crib, the baby's tiny hands reaching toward the mobile hanging above her. For a moment, Claire simply lay there, absorbing the unfamiliar feeling of having slept through the night without jolting awake at every sound. The apartment smelled of coffee and something sweet. Claire lifted Lily from the crib, changed her diaper, and ventured into the kitchen. Vincent stood at the stove, dressed in dark jeans and a gray sweater, somehow managing to make cooking breakfast look effortlessly elegant. "You cook?" Claire asked, surprise evident in her voice. Vincent glanced over his shoulder, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I learned young. Self-sufficiency was necessary in my house. Nobody was going to take care of me, so I figured out how to take care of myself." He plated scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, setting everything on the island counter. "There's formula in the cabinet if you need it. I had my assistant stock the kitchen early this morning." Claire settled Lily into a bouncer seat Vincent had somehow acquired overnight and sat down to eat. "This is incredible." "Thank you." Vincent poured. Coffee for both of them, his movements precise and controlled. "I made some calls this morning. I have a security team watching the building and monitoring any activity related to Derek Patterson. If he makes a move, we'll know about it." Unveiling the truth, Claire set down her fork, studying Vincent carefully. "Who are you, really? I mean, you have security teams and assistants who work before dawn. You live in a penthouse that probably costs more than I'd make in 10 years. People don't just have this kind of power without a reason." Vincent leaned against the counter, his dark eyes unreadable. "I run several businesses in Seattle. Import and export primarily, real estate investments, some technology ventures. I've built an empire over the past 15 years through careful planning and strategic relationships." "That sounds very official," Claire said softly. "But it doesn't explain why you seem so comfortable with danger, or why you knew exactly how to handle Derek last night without even raising your voice." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. "My businesses operate in gray areas sometimes. I deal with people who don't always follow conventional rules. I've learned to navigate dangerous waters because that's the world I chose to enter." Claire absorbed this information, understanding what he wasn't quite saying. "You're telling me you're connected to organized crime. I'm telling you that I'm someone who gets things done when traditional systems fail." Vincent met her gaze steadily. "I don't hurt innocent people. I don't deal in anything that exploits the vulnerable. But I operate outside the law when the law is insufficient." An unexpected understanding. Claire surprised herself by feeling no fear at this revelation. Instead, she felt a strange sense of clarity. "So when you said Derek wouldn't find us here, you meant it literally. You have the power to make him disappear." Vincent's expression hardened. "I have the power to ensure he never hurts you or Lily again. What that means exactly depends on what he does next." "Does that scare me?" Claire asked herself aloud. She looked down at Lily, who was batting happily at the toys dangling from her bouncer. "It should, but it doesn't. Maybe that makes me a terrible person." "It makes you a mother who wants to protect her child," Vincent said gently. "There's nothing terrible about that." Before Claire could respond, Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. His jaw tightened, his eyes went cold, and suddenly Claire saw the dangerous man beneath the careful civility. "What is it?" she asked, her heart already beginning to race. Vincent looked up, his voice controlled but laced with steel. "Derek's been making inquiries through some local networks. He's offering money for information about you. One of my contacts just sent me a warning that Derek's traced my vehicle from last night." Claire's hands began to shake. "He knows where we are." "Not exactly, but he knows you're with me." Vincent set down his phone and moved toward the windows, his mind clearly racing through options. He'll come here eventually. The question is when and how prepared he'll be. Fortress or prison? "What do we do?" Claire whispered, pulling Lily from the bouncer and holding her close. Vincent turned back to face her, and in that moment Claire saw the full force of who he really was. This wasn't just a successful businessman. This was someone who'd survived by being harder, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone around him. "We prepare," Vincent said simply. "I've already called in additional security. This building has systems in place that most people can't imagine. But Claire, you need to understand something." She waited, her heart pounding. "Once Derek knows you're connected to me, this becomes a different kind of conflict. He's not just dealing with a woman he thinks he owns anymore. He's stepping into territory where he has no power, no connections, no leverage. That will either make him back down or make him desperate. And desperate people are dangerous," Claire finished. Vincent nodded. "Exactly." The morning light suddenly felt less comforting. Claire moved to the windows, looking down at the city stretching below them. Somewhere down there, Derek was searching, planning, probably drinking himself into a rage. She knew him well enough to know he wouldn't give up easily. "I'm putting you in danger just by being here," Claire said quietly. "Maybe I should leave, find somewhere else to hide." Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and gently turned her to face him. "You're not leaving. Running from shelter to shelter, constantly looking over your shoulder, that's not a life for you or Lily. We end this here." "How?" Claire asked, searching his face. "The hunter becomes hunted by showing Derek Patterson that he's no longer hunting prey. He's facing a predator." Before Claire could respond, the intercom system buzzed. Vincent moved to the panel on the wall, pressing a button. His head of security's voice crackled through the speaker. "Boss, we have a situation. There's a man in the lobby claiming he's here to see a Claire Bennett. He's aggressive, possibly intoxicated. Building security is holding him, but he's making threats." Vincent's expression went completely cold. "Show him to conference room B. I'll be down in 5 minutes." Claire grabbed his arm. "Don't go down there. He's dangerous when he's drunk. He could have a weapon." Vincent covered her hand with his touch surprisingly warm despite the ice in his eyes. "Claire, I've dealt with men far more dangerous than Derek Patterson. He's about to learn what real danger looks like. I don't want you to get hurt because of me," Claire said, her voice breaking. Vincent cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen to me. You and Lily are mine to protect now. That's not a burden. That's a choice I made the moment I locked those car doors last night. Derek is going to understand that he lost the second you stepped into my world." 10 minutes later, Vincent entered the conference room on the building's 3rd floor. Derek stood by the windows, his clothes rumpled, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. 2 of Vincent's security team stood by the door, their presence quietly menacing. Derek spun around when Vincent entered. "Where is she? Where's Claire?" "That's my daughter she has. She can't just take my kid and disappear." Vincent closed the door behind him and moved to stand behind the conference table, his posture relaxed but his eyes deadly focused. "Sit down, Derek. I don't take orders from you," Derek snarled. "Who do you think you are?" Vincent's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I'm the man standing between you and Claire, and you're going to sit down and listen very carefully to what?" I have to say, something in Vincent's tone made Derek hesitate. He'd spent years being the biggest threat in the room, the one who made others flinch. But looking at Vincent Romano, he felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Fear. Derek sat down slowly, his bravado cracking. Vincent remained standing, looming over the table like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this building and never come near Claire or Lily again. You're going to forget they exist. You're going to disappear from their lives. Completely." Derek let out a harsh laugh. "Or what? You'll call the cops? She's the one who kidnapped my kid." The price of violence. Vincent leaned forward, his hands flat on the table, his face inches from Derek's. "I'm not going to call the cops. I'm going to make you understand something very simple. Every time you raised your hand to Claire, every time you made her fear for her life or her daughter's safety, You were marking yourself. You were creating a debt that someone would eventually collect. Derek's face paled slightly. You threatening me? Vincent straightened up, smoothing his sweater with deliberate calm. I don't make threats. I make promises. And here's my promise to you, Derek Patterson. If you come within 100 feet of Claire or Lily again, if you make any attempt to contact them or find them or hurt them, you will disappear. Not arrested. Not charged. Disappeared. The room went absolutely silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Derek looked at the security guards by the door, at Vincent's cold eyes, and finally understood that he was completely out of his depth. You can't do this, Derek said, but his voice shook. I already have. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Derek the screen. Those are photos of every place you've lived for the past 5 years. Every person you've contacted in the last 72 hours. Every debt you owe, every law you've broken. Every person you've hurt. I know everything about you, Derek, and I have the resources to make sure that information reaches exactly the right people. Derek stared at the phone, his face going from red to white. This is insane. A new beginning. What's insane is that you thought you could hunt a woman and child through my city without consequences, Vincent said softly. What's insane is that you believed violence made you powerful. Real power, Derek, is having the ability to destroy someone and choosing not to. I'm giving you that gift right now. Vincent straightened and moved toward the door. You have 24 hours to leave Seattle. If you're still here after that, my people will find you, and you won't enjoy what happens next. The security guards opened the door. Vincent paused in the doorway and looked back at Derek, who sat slumped in his chair, all his rage deflated into fear. One more thing, Vincent said. Claire is going to file for full custody of Lily. You're going to consent without contest. You're going to sign away all parental rights. My lawyers will contact you with the paperwork. Sign it. And if I don't? Vincent's smile was colder than winter. Then you'll learn exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine. He left Derek sitting, there, his world crumbling around him, and took the elevator back up to the penthouse. When he entered, Claire was standing by the windows, Lily asleep in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Is it over? She whispered. Vincent crossed to her and gently wiped away her tears. It's over. He's leaving Seattle. You're free. Claire let out a sob of relief and exhaustion, and Vincent pulled her into his arms, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby between them. For a long moment, they stood there, 3 people who'd found each other in a storm and somehow created shelter. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Seattle summer was unusually warm, the sky brilliant blue above the Sound. Claire stood on the penthouse balcony, watching Lily crawl across a blanket spread on the deck, babbling happily at the clouds. Vincent emerged from inside, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He settled into a chair, watching Claire with an expression that had become increasingly common over the past months. Something softer than the man who'd first picked her up in the rain. Something that looked almost like peace. Derek signed the final papers yesterday, Vincent said. His lawyer confirmed he's in California now, working construction, staying clean. Claire nodded, feeling nothing at the news. That part of her life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Do you think he'll stay away? Vincent reached out and took her hand. He knows what happens if he doesn't. But more importantly, you're not the same woman he used to control. You're stronger now. We're stronger now, Claire corrected, squeezing his fingers. Lily chose that moment to pull herself up on wobbly legs, taking 2 unsteady steps before falling onto her padded bottom with a surprised squeal. Both Vincent and Claire rushed over, laughing, helping the baby stand again. She's going to be walking soon, Claire said, wonder in her voice. Running before we know it. Vincent scooped Lily up, the baby immediately reaching for his face with sticky fingers. Then, We'll have to chase her together. Claire watched them, this unlikely family they'd built from desperation and fear and something deeper. Love hadn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It had arrived quietly, in shared midnight conversations and morning coffee, in the way Vincent checked on Lily every night before bed, in the way Claire had learned to read the emotions, beneath his careful control. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, noticing her expression. Claire moved closer, wrapping her arms around both of them. "I'm thinking that the worst night of my life led me to the best thing that ever happened. To me." Vincent kissed her forehead gently. "We saved each other, and as the Seattle sun painted the sky in shades of gold and amber, three people who'd been lost in separate storms stood together, finally finding the peace they'd been searching for all along." Claire had jumped into a stranger's car expecting nothing but temporary shelter. Instead, she'd found a home, a protector, and against all odds, a love that had been forged in darkness and emerged into light. The city stretched below them, full of stories still unfolding, lives still intersecting in unexpected ways. But in that moment on that balcony high above it all, their story had found its happy ending. Not perfect, not without scars, but theirs, and that was enough. The end.